join the mailing list. So now I'm moving over to the special event of today, and it's a great pleasure to welcome Patrick and Sue, who've I've seen them coming in and out of these events and our various Amazon things for quite a long time. The long-standing events of the Amazon, friends of the Amazon, and events of the Amazon as well. And they've worked in the Xingu and other areas of Brazil for over 40 years as a photojournalist and as a journalist. And in particular, in 2007, they did I'm sure we'll hear about this, an expedition of the length of the Xingu, the huge tributary of the Amazon, through the Xingu Indigenous Reserve that we'll hear about today. And they've been long-standing friends of the indigenous communities of the Xingu in particular, and founded this charity that supports a lot of activities and community-based activities there we'll hear about. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
I'm a bit nervous about your sword there, so I'll get out of the way.
Sit down. I'll show you all about it in a minute. Anyway, good afternoon. Thank you so much for coming on this lovely Friday afternoon. You know, you're supposed to be nearly on holiday, so I'm really pleased that you're here, because so will all the indigenous peoples that are following what I'm doing closely. Well, I don't know how many of you have been to the Amazon, or you know how deeply you've been into Brazil, but we're Tribes Alive. We're a very small charity that work with indigenous peoples and have done for the last 20 years. Because we were journalists and photographer, but then one day I met Chief Raoni, and he anchored my soul to the forest, literally, and I never turned back. And he made out of this pathetic photographer a very, very dear friend. So that's just a little introduction, or both of us, in fact. So the big Amazon River, it's huge, isn't it? But there are lots of tributaries, and one of the main tributaries, of course, is the Xingu River. We're talking about an area the size of Great Britain, which lies in that little pocket. Oh, thank you. In that little pocket. And it runs from south to north, and it goes through a lot of indigenous territories and a lot of different indigenous peoples. In fact, there are 16 different tribal languages. There's different Swedish and, I don't know, Chinese. So it's really difficult sometimes to understand. You go from one village to the next and you think, just a minute, they sound totally different. And you've got to start all over again. So we took our little boat. Admittedly, we did get an award from the Royal Geographical Society, blah, blah, blah. And so we were able to pay for the boat, but nothing else. So we then navigated. It's 2,500 kilometers long. We're not talking the Thames here. And along the way, you go through all different types of biomes. And the first section really is the Cerrado. It's quite scrubby and doesn't look very pretty, but it's the most amazing place and has the most amazing fruits and flowers and scents, and it's rich. And that was a piqué flower, which I love. And then you go through a transition forest, because you can't suddenly go into the Amazon. And then eventually you do get to the tall trees where everything's very dark underneath the canopy. And really the only flowers that you get to see would be from the top, if you're on a hill. This is actually a hill in the Carajás project. I don't know if you know that, the iron ore project. And Carajás, I took this picture in 1987, and where I'm standing is no more. It's a mountain of iron ore that's disappeared. So that view is no more either. It's unique. What? Yeah, you're probably driving it exactly in your cars, or have done in the past. Anyway, so as I said, the flowers are usually on top because, you know, that's where they get the sunlight. Underneath, it's very dark, full of roots you can trip over. Fun, but they're also people, and they're beautiful people, don't you think? Yes? No? The only other person who traveled the full length of the Xingu River was Carl von den Stein in 1884. Looked a bit rough with his beard there, but, you know, he managed it. So we thought, well, if he can do it, why can't we? So we took our little boat with our little engine. He didn't have an engine, but he had like 25 people, you know. And we had solar panels on top so we could feed our equipment, because where we're going, there's no electricity, there's no posto de gasolina, you can't suddenly fill up, and you know, so you have to take everything that you're going to use with you. So you have to decide, right, is it petrol or is it salt for the chief? Well, there's a decision. Anyway, as I said, there's so many different territories that you go through, conservation areas, but the one thing that's very evident, and it was then, and it still is now, only much worse, is the deforestation in the area. You can see this in all the red dots there. It's horrendous. And the fires increase every year. Erica, she knows all about that too. So I could go on about that, but come on, let's move through. So the river is very important because it's really their highway. It's not just for having fun, although that is good. Most of the villages are built in a circle, and the circle is then in the middle is the men's hut. And the men's hut is really like a town hall, or maybe it's like going down the pub, because it's all the guys sit there and just jabber all afternoon. That's where we had to say hello. So when you are confronted by people who don't know your language, all painted in Junipapo and some with Uruku, and they've got these, which they love, and they go and say, why are you here? What are you doing here? What have you come to give us? And they don't mean in presents. Their gift is something else. It's very spiritual. So I suppose we survived that, and we got used to it. We did it 48 times. So they use a lot of anato, which is in your margarine, for the red color for their body paint and face paint. And the most intricate designs are done with junipapo, which is mixed with charcoal, and then painted on. And after about 8 hours, you wash it off and your skin is dyed. It's quite something coming back to London, all painted, and people look at you and go. And then one day I was in the traffic and there was a truck driver leans out and he goes, oh, you've been with them Indians? I thought, my God, you know, half my friends don't know about things like that. Anyway, so what they do now. Anyway, the paint is done. It's put on with these tiny little sticks. It's a real art, and the women are so good at it. They use designs, sometimes their finger as well. They use designs from the forest, so seeds and things like that. And the tapir, the baby tapir, has spots. He has stripes and spots. So when you see the design like that, you know that that man hasn't gone through the last of the stages of initiation, because he's still got spots. He's still young. So as I said, the women are fantastic. Some of them, they start off with their traditional designs, but then they sort of branch out and do some amazing designs, and steal designs from us, like flags and things. You'll see that later. Anyway, they are beautiful, and they make their bodies just glisten in the sun. They're just fantastic. And that spirituality is in everything that they do. The beauty of what, you know, when they paint a face of a child, the child is like, Zen. And, you know, whether they're using junipapo or urukum, they can also use colored stones, which they grind up, and then they paint their pots, which they make themselves out of local clay. And then they cover it in a resin from a tree, which makes it waterproof. Perfect. You know, who needs a supermarket? Do come in. You've only missed half of it. Anyway, so this is a Kamayura, and he made a bench. In the Alto Xingu, all the villages have their own little benches, which they make themselves out of wood, and often they paint it with their own designs. So, and they actually do sell it in in artisanal fairs, artifact fairs. Come on, Paddy, help me. You know, I'm no good at speaking English. Anyway, so if you look at this stylized, think a little. This is for the festa, this is for the celebration of the hummingbird. So if you look at it like that, there's the body, the tail, and the legs. Not bad, eh? They have a different way of looking at things. So this, on the other hand, you can see is a jaguar. And why? Because he had to grapple in self-defense. So he earned the right to wear the claws of the jaguar around his neck and use the face paint on certain celebration days. So the body paint is not just an identity. You can tell sometimes which village or which area they come from or which tribe. But to them, it's protection. They wouldn't dream of going into the forest without some form of body paint. They wouldn't dream without asking the spirits of the forest to protect them. And so it doesn't matter what he's wearing or, you know, what he looks like. Underneath, he's got the body paint. It's there and it lasts for 3 weeks. So he can go on a hunting expedition quite easily. So these little points here are all the different villages, you know, and as I said, we went to 48 villages and very, very different one from another. Excuse me. Every village has its own culture. Some of them overlap slightly, like the whole area of the first bit, which is the Alto Xingu. A lot of the indigenous people speak various languages from their neighboring tribes. So it's really interesting to see how they've used and combined, and it's always the women. They're clever, aren't they? Not like the men, they're a bit gung-ho. Anyway, but they do love to paint and celebrate with feathers and dancing and beautiful body paint. And the girls join in, of course. And some of the celebrations, they have incredible masks, which usually are made by the women again. And sometimes they don't wear much at all. So when Afukaka, Bikuru, came across the central area where I was just coming out of the men's hut thinking, oh, survived that one. He was coming towards me with his bike. I didn't know who he was. He got off the bike, naked, obviously, and he said, "What are you?" So I gave it, where did you look when you gave me your hand? Do it again. Where did you look? No, where did you look the first time? You looked here. Yeah, but here is in line with here. And if I've got no clothes on, you're going to go, oh, aren't you? Maybe? Yes, exactly. Well, I did, but only the first time, because then I thought, we're going to be on this trip for 6 months. What am I going to do? So I thought, what am I going to do? I've got to get used to this because I can't go around for 6 months, you know, like this and not look down. I mean, but it's amazing how you get used to it because there's no malice in their nudity. It's just beauty. Beauty, whether you're old and wrinkled or fat or thin or pregnant or God knows what. It's just beauty. And you get used to it because it's so infectious. So in one of the celebrations that I don't know why, it must be season for celebrations because we went to so many en route. And these two girls had just come out of seclusion. Now, seclusion, they don't see the sun because they're learning intensely, a bit like you at university. You know, you don't get out in the sun because you're, but they are, you know, very pale skinned underneath all that lovely brownness when they're dancing out in the sun. But these two girls have spent at least a year in a seclusion where the shaman comes, the elders come, the midwife comes, the woman who knows all about herbs and medicines and artifacts and designs. So they couldn't possibly learn everything they need to learn while they're doing their daily life in the village. So they go into seclusion for a time. And eventually they come out looking a bit pale. But dancing is everywhere. It doesn't matter which village, which ethnic group, which part of Brazil you're in, dancing is absolutely central to everything. It's not for nothing that we have the samba, right? So even when somebody has just died, I mean, when we go to a celebrant, when we go, unless we're going to a wake, of course, but if we go to a funeral, it's a very solemn affair. I'm not saying they're not sad because they are. They're deeply saddened by the loss of life. But there's a celebration of the life of the person that died. And the children join in, and the women join in. There's a man buried here. He was a very important chief. So all these people are celebrating his life. And they sometimes invite people from all other villages. And it's a big event, and it goes on for days and days and days, and full of ritual. I can't go in through every bit. Sorry, it's called the Kwarup. Thank you. And of course, here they're laughing. How can they be laughing at a funeral? Because this is a dance, and they are remembering when the chief fell off a canoe into the water. And that was hilarious. So they, of course, all laughed about it, which is lovely. It's lovely, I think. They adapt to, you know, I mean, somebody gave them some bells, so they put them on their bells. Lovely. Now, young men, you love to show off, don't you? So I wonder how you would show off in one of these celebrations. To show your strength, you're scarred with the teeth of the dogfish. And they're like little paper cuts, and it hurts like hell. Sorry, it hurts a lot. And yes, that's the dog. They're good to eat as well, so nothing gets wasted. As I said before, they love color. Any color, you bring them some thread of color or beads of color, and they will make something out of it. The other way to show your strength, of course, is huka, which is a kind of wrestling, which the idea is to throw your opponent on his back. That's not always possible between two very strong men, and everybody watches it. And they can be locked in this position like two jaguars, you know, for about 10, 15 minutes. It's absolutely extraordinary. And so whoops. So sometimes they just part, and there's no winner, there's no loser. They just walk each to their own position around the village, and they're hailed as a hero because they're strong. They didn't lose to the opponent, but they also didn't win. It doesn't matter. And that's a different way of looking at things. We always want to go for the winner, and who came first, and no, it's not always like that. Now, water, we can't live without it, can we? Water is the most important thing we could possibly need in life. Whether you're a child enjoying the river, and they start really young, or whether it's to drink, of course, it's got to be clean for that. And at the moment, over the last few years, the pollution that runs into the Xingu River can get so bad at some places that they can't even see the fish, so they can't even hunt with a bow and arrow anymore. They practically fish blind. So they'll find a place where they think the fish are. Of course, they know the currents and stuff, and they'll just throw in a hook and line. But of course, a hook and line, they have to purchase. It's not like before when they could make a bow and arrow and do it themselves. We realized how dry the borders of the Xingu is, unfortunately. And I took this one very early morning where 3 generations of women, his grandmother, mother, and daughter, were taking water from a small igarapé, which is a small tributary of the river, where the water was still clean, because there's no mining upriver, there's nothing. So they were able to drink that water. You'd be hard pushed to find one now. Every village has either got a well or a purification system. And that's extremely sad when we're talking about a rainforest. But, you know, the water evaporates off the river. It evaporates off the trees. And the important thing is about the Amazon system, which I'm sure you all know, the flying rivers. Yes? No? Okay. So the water comes off the ocean and it goes towards the trees, the forest. During the day, the water then evaporates into clouds, and the wind then pushes it further on, and it falls as rain, and then it's pushed forwards and falls as rain, up till it gets to the Andes, where it has to turn south because the Andes are so high, it can't get past it. And when it goes south, it goes to Uruguay, to Argentina, to Sao Paulo, you know, all the places where the crops, the commercial crops are grown in Brazil. So really the people in the South should be absolutely blessing the feet of every single indigenous person in the Amazon, because they're holding the forest up. If they go, the chainsaws come. If they go, the trees will die. If the trees die and the rain stops, it'll be bad for all of us, not just for them. And they're aware of it. And they also love playing in the rain. So our little boat went chugging along and somebody caught a ride there. It happens in more ways than one. But the big threat all around the Xingu area is enormous. It is so disgusting. It's so disheartening. It just makes me want to cry every time I see an aerial shot or a satellite image. And I think, when is it going to stop? It's only stopping because the Indians are there around the perimeter. They're building small villages all around the perimeter so that they can defend themselves. They're the guardians of the forest. They're the ones that are defending the forest for us, for everybody, for humanity. So years ago, the forest looked like that wherever I went. It didn't matter how many thousands of kilometers I crisscrossed the Amazon. It was like this. It was fantastic. I fell in love with it then. But it's disappearing very, very, very fast. And the first wave of destruction are the loggers. They come in and they cut away, take out the best logs, and usually burn the rest. But then to take the logs out, they make trails which turn into roads, even if they're dust roads. And with that comes all the other destruction, because if there's a road going this way, people are going to go that way. So you're opening it up, basically. So although since that man's gone and Lula's taken over, he has tried with the military police, with the federal police, and with Ibama, and he's tried very hard to make things happen. Marina Silva's been amazing, the minister, but it's not enough. It's a drop in the ocean when what's needed. Last night, somebody sent me a map, and I was in tears. I said, I can't even do the talk tomorrow. I don't know what I'm going to say. It was so shocking. And if you have a look at recent maps of the Amazon, see the destruction, zoom in. Well, maybe not. Do it after the holidays, because you'll just cry. Even at the mouth of the Xingu, when it goes into the Amazon after Altamira, Porto de Mós, right on the big Amazon River, that we saw rafts of illegal logs coming out of the Xingu area. It's still going on. So the second wave, sorry, I got carried away there. The second wave, of course, are the fires. They set fire to the rest of the forest because it's uninteresting. They can get a bigger loan if the forest is destroyed. They can go to the bank and say, I want. Oh, but you've got, scrub land. And no, I'll burn it all. I'll burn it all. Okay, well, then you get a bigger loan. So some of these fires are so intense and so horrendous, and they're set indiscriminately. So you've got winds coming from all sorts of directions, and ends up going really close to the villages, which is so dangerous. I mean, Erica in her area, and we're supporting as Tribes Alive. One of our projects is the firefighters, the Brigadistas do Xingu, and they're training and they're getting equipment, because the first pictures I had of them doing this, they were in flip-flops with a palm leaf going like this, with fires that are 10 kilometers long coming towards you at an incredible speed. I mean, it was just shocking. And I thought, no, we got to do something. Sorry, am I putting everyone off? So after the fires, you get scrubland, grass, not very good, but good enough for cattle. And of course, where there's cattle laundering, as we know, with JBS, one of the biggest meat packing companies. I don't want to go into every detail, but if there's something that you want to ask me afterwards, you can. When we were in the Kayapo region, we took two friends of ours, Krut and Tumbere, they're chiefs from Aukli. And I said, well, you know, if you want to see what's really going on your land, and come up with us and we'll fly over. And when we did, they were absolutely shocked with what they saw. Remember, this was in 2007. So whenever there's a road, that's when it starts, the deforestation starts. And of course, some little man who deforests a little bit, he can sell it to someone who's got more money, and that person will then buy the next plot and the next plot. I just call this image, sorry?
Finger of progress.
Yeah, well, I usually use stronger language than that. The finger of progress, sort of eking its way, you know, the voracity of economic greed, just sort of eating away at their forest at every opportunity from every angle. So, you know, sometimes it looks rather geometric and beautiful, but in fact, the true story of it is that this dry land is only good for one thing: for putting pesticides on, herbicides on, polluting the water system, and growing soya. This was once a forest. There's the only last tree remained to say, hey, I was a forest once. Horrible, absolutely horrible. And it's not the soya milk you have in your tea, so don't worry. So mining, of course, is the big no-no at the moment, because we're actually talking to lawyers who want to take on certain British companies who have interests. They've got gold mines right on the border of indigenous reserves and areas that are like 40 kilometers from a village. The water's polluted, it's disgusting. Wow. Anyway, so whether it's a big mine like this, Carajás open cast mine, or whether it's illegal gold mining where individuals come and pan, but they've been put there with a plane. They've, you know, whoever owns the plane or the planes, we met a man who had 300 small planes. Imagine the destruction he can cause, you know, the havoc he can cause in the Amazon, and has done. Mercury is the big thing. That man kept pouring mercury out of his hand, and I said, oh, I didn't get that shot. Can you do it again, please? So he did it again and again. I said, oh, your wedding ring's melting. He said, doesn't matter, they'll do me another one next week. You know, you can't argue, can you?
He was the State Secretary for the Environment.
Hondonia. You're laughing, Erica. You're the only one laughing. You're saying, how did you survive? Yes, well, that's another story. Anyway, so I was with my kids. They were little at the time. Anyway, no, never mind. So they use high-powered hoses and tools, and it's big business. So when they come illegally, they come under the radar with small planes, small pistas. You know, they open a very small landing strip. And of course, those landing strips are often used for drug trafficking as well. So, you know, they could really clean up. I mean, the authorities, never mind. When you fly over, you can see the pollution. It's so obvious. It's just there. And people have to drink that water, or not, as the case may be. And the violence, there's so much violence, not just against women, but against each other. They try to divide tribes. They try to bribe some young guy and say, look, I'll just go into your forest and do a little bit here. Oh, I'll give you, you know, a pair of sneakers or something. And of course, some, you know, 10-year-old's going to go, oh, that sounds good. And then he tries to convince his parents. And then the divisions in some of the tribes is so pitiful. And then you go back a few years later and the whole system's destroyed. But luckily, there are elders or even young elders who have taken over now and who say, right, that's it, finished. You want to live that life, go to town. You're not welcome here anymore. And they're expelled from the tribe and they start again. And they start with the people that want to keep it good. Thank God. So there's sort of people that we try to support. The defenders. So they do use our technology, but they choose what they want to use. I mean, this solar panel is, you know, look at them. They're all body painted, these young kids. but that's used for the pharmacy to keep the fridge with medicines and things in. Perfect. Who needs electricity? Now, there's one place in the middle of the Alto Xingu where doctors come every year for a month or two, and you do little surgical procedures, shall we say. And you know, so everybody knows, and they all come to Porto Leonardo to try and get seen by a doctor or a dentist or something. So when I saw these two kids looking in, I thought, oh my God, what are they watching? This is going to be really gruesome. I don't know how I'm going to handle this. Anyway, they were watching Harry Potter because one of the doctors decided to bring the videos in. Well, that's very nice, except that after that, they thought we could fly. Right. No. Sorry, mate. I can't do. Wish I could. Be a lot cheaper than getting a plane anyway. So there's Patrick, and he's showing some of the indigenous peoples from Pucraimoro, all about video. They absolutely love images of themselves, but they don't want it to be abused for obvious reasons. So they're learning. And there are a number of schemes, especially Video nas Aldeias, where they actually learn how to manage a video camera and edit. But the procedure is really difficult. They have to learn, you know, right from the start, you know, what you're going to say with your video, why do you want to do it? So it's not overnight, and it's taken a good 10 years. So this is the I know it looks like a football team. Probably is as well. You see, look, he's got one of those. No, anyway, this chap here, when we met him in 2007, was really interested in video. And he was already doing a course of Video nas Aldeias. Well, today, he came to London to show his films at the ICA. So, you know, things do happen. And I think that his films are amazing. He started off by making films specifically to show other villages and his own people. And if you go to another village and there's a film from Tacumã, you have a look and everybody starts laughing before the funny scene happens because they've seen it so often. They just absolutely adore it. But yeah, football, of course, there isn't a village without a football. And if there is, they're asking you for one. So this lady's taking her kids to school across a lake. And the indigenous peoples now can read and write, a lot of them, in their own language. And a lot of them are learning Portuguese. They're learning maths so that they can make sure they're not being cheated when they're selling their artifacts. And geography. They learn geography, all about the world and where they are in relation to everything else. And they ask me, why is your country then half deforested? Anyway, they know so much more about us than we know about them. It's shameful. So when I saw this, and I thought, oh, here we are, taking designs. If it's not Banco do Brasil, it's a British flag, because they love the colors. And I said, so what's all this? He said, oh, well, that's America, that's South Africa, that's England, that's... He knew them all, you know. He knew what each of those flags represented, which is amazing. So you've got people like young men who actually are interested in medicine. They learn to be nurses, to be part of the vaccination program, to give medicines for dentists and oral hygiene. It's just incredible how much they've learned in a short space of time. If you think, you know, it took us 100 years and they're jumping huge, huge arcs of time. It's fascinating. Sorry. So they do, all of them, whatever they've studied in medicine, they do work very closely with the shamans, because the first protocol if someone's ill in a village is the shaman. And if he can't resolve it, or he thinks he needs a bit more help, he'll go together with one of the nurses and they'll try to find solutions. And they use natural things. I mean, those beads are actually from an oil from a tree. And when somebody has a sort of muscular problems, he rubs it till it melts on the palm, and then he uses that. I mean, you know, it's simple. He can travel wherever he wants with it, just with the collar, and that's it. Sorry, collar, no, necklace. So their use of medicinal plants is amazing. And you go to any village in the Amazon and there'll be a market, and in the market there will be medicinal plants. You know, most of them come from indigenous, or at least riberinos, which are people that live next to the river, and they've had an interaction therefore with indigenous peoples. That's for water, would you believe? Oh, it's so cool. It's wonderful. It comes from a liana. During COVID, we supported many of the villages by sending some money to town where they would buy provisions. They would be sanitized. They would sent by boat along the river, deposited on the banks of where the village is. And then the boat would carry on. And then they'd wait 3 days. And then they would come to the banks and pick up the food or whatever it was they were. It was yeah, very, very difficult from London, but it worked, and it was fantastic. And I'm so glad we were able to do it in a small way. Another one was the respirators, because before they were sending planes with canisters of oxygen to villages. So as soon as they're depleted, they have to get picked up from the village and taken away and filled again, which is ridiculous. And then we found out about these oxygenators, which are only about that big, which basically takes, you know, just leaves the oxygen out of the air into, oh, sorry, what am I saying? Thank you. Leaves the oxygen. So it was fantastic because it saved so many lives, and we managed to get it to 50 different villages, which was brilliant, I think. With the help of Amazon Watch. The slide before had poison for arrows. This one here looks pretty evil, doesn't it? The color. And that is glue, which honestly, you glue something with that, you're not going to unglue it again. And then they use all sorts of things. This is breu, which is used to purify a hut, or if there's been sickness or something, but it smells so delicious that there are perfume companies that are really, really mad for it. And so the Indians then harvest it. I mean, look, even the ants like it, for goodness sake. So I keep talking about the women because really they're the heart of everything. They just get on with it. They don't talk about it, they do. So every morning they meet together. They get the manioc and they scrape the skin off the manioc roots and they make a manioc flour. The best is actually poisonous, so they have to wash it and wash it and wash it. It's only poisonous for humans because that little parrot is having a nice old little peck at it. They make a flour, sometimes they roast it, other times they make the most amazing bijou. So food, the staple food really is bijou, and it's not that little bijou you get in a hotel. This is the real thing. And the pans that they make them out of the same argila, what? Clay, thank you. The same clay like the pots. So, you know, they can withstand a lot of heat. And maize, every color of maize, just like in the Andes. It's amazing. And I think there was years ago, there's an anthropologist here who maybe can help. There must have been some interchange because it's the only place where you can get every color. Piranha, of course, all over the place. You can always catch a piranha for dinner. They're not the best to eat. Besides, those teeth, they can take off a finger just like that. So, but pacu is very nice, and there are lots of, and oh yes, tucunaré, my favorite. So Takumi, this lovely boy, he brought dinner, which was half a bijou, no, a whole bijou, but folded over with half a tucunaré. And Patty said, it's never enough. Anyway, the kids know where the fruits are. They know when things are ripe. They'll go out and catch things or bring stuff back. Did you know that the cashew nut comes from a cashew fruit? You did? Oh, good. Well, not everybody does. Anyway, that's why those little nuts are so expensive, because they actually come in a big fruit and you have to take the fruit away. And actually, you can make a juice, but it doesn't travel well. Guaraná, which is in all your energy drinks that you love so much. Have a look. It says guaraná. That's that stuff. And some of the protein comes not from wild monkey and boar, but from rubs, which are in abundance along the trail. if you go out from a village, you'll always see different types of vegetation with different types of fruits and vegetables and seeds, and you know, whether it's to make a necklace, whether it's to eat, whether it's to cook, whether it's for medicine. So there's always this abundance of biodiversity, and also for making their own houses. So they use a specific tree which bends when it's dry. They don't need a hammer. They don't need nails. They can be perfectly happy making their own things. They use a bark and twine it round, and that holds, and it can load for a long time. Look at the load on that, and look how beautiful. And the design again, always the designs, wonderful. Oh, some of you have slept in a hammock, I can tell. Yes, it's like a big hug, isn't it? Well, there we are. He's sleeping peacefully, and they love honey. And there's another project where they're actually making pots of honey to export to other areas around Brazil. Mel dos Índios do Xingu. Bom, né? Very good for sore throats. Anyway, so the designs and the smiles are everywhere, always. So another project we were involved with was licensing some of the designs from this particular tribe of Kayapo, and the women had me running around getting coffee for them all the time. Went on for 3 days making all sorts of different designs, and I took them back to London, and we licensed. We got a license from a company who used them for clothes. Actually, I've got a bag over there that's design.
Oil, rainforest oil.
Oh, yes, babasu oil. So another company, actually here from Oxfordshire, they bought 300 kilos, 300 liters of oil from another indigenous village in the Kayapo, and they make the best babasu oil. All the other indigenous groups want to buy from them because it's the best. Yes, I know, I haven't got any at the moment, it shows, but you know, I'm going back and I'll bring back a liter. So, that was also a project that went for a while and then it stopped because it was organic oil, and then the gold miners polluted the waters, so they lost their organic certification. Yeah.
Why don't you take some questions?
What comes next?
I don't know, because it's the
Crushed.
no, we ran out of juice because it wasn't properly plugged in.
Oh,
Take
good
some
Lord.
questions.
Any questions? Yes.
Well, thank you for that. I've been so far, so we get a bit more. One of the challenges, I think you hinted a bit of this, one of the challenges of any indigenous groups, however well organized they are, is like this onslaught of the outside world, and how that challenges the social structures, and how have your time there, how have you found how these groups have met with those challenges? And
If there is a strong cacique, and he's got to be strong, he can control that. He can also expel people against the will of the mother. You know, you want to live like that? There's the door. Go. Bye-bye. But don't come back. We don't want your pollution, soul and mind, here in the village. And, you know, I've seen indigenous peoples where the kid has come back crawling, pleading, please, people were mean to me. They beat me up. They wouldn't give me a job. I've got no money. I haven't eaten for weeks. Look at me. I'm all skinny. All right. Well, you can start by building a house there. You can do this there. So, yes, if the cacique is strong, but it can cause division. And the minute too much money comes into a village, it's a no-no. Unless you've actually found a way of giving every single person their share, forget it. Now, times 250, times 400, it can be complicated. And there's always it's hard. It's hard for them. It's extremely hard for me to see because I'm an outsider. I can't sort of say, oh, what you're doing is wrong. They can always point to you and say, well, your shoes are better than mine. You can say, well, when I leave, I'll leave them for you, Of course, during the trip, it was easy because I'd say, oh, what am I going to wear for the rest of the trip? You've seen that my boat's empty. I've got nothing else to, So you can joke about it. You can get a message across, but you'll have to repeat it again and again and again. And they repeat it amongst themselves too. And it's a really hard thing. It's really hard. Because more and more some of them got internet, some of them come back with stories from town. Music is one of the things, they're on their mobile phones or something, and then all the village can hear the music and, oh, well, I want that too. And, oh.
Can I come in?
And who are we to say no? Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are a lot of issues. There are things that they've taken on board that are really brilliant, that reinforce their cultures, like video. The use of video has been amazingly strong for their cultures. But coming in with highly processed foods, sugary, fatty foods, there's a huge problem with diabetes, with heart disease, suffering the bad side of our health that we have here. So it's by no means all good by any means. It's a difficult issue. But they are very resourceful, they're very adaptable, and they're pretty good. Nobody's perfect, but they're pretty good at, as Sue was saying, selecting the things that are useful for them, the things that make their lives better, and mostly the things that don't undermine their own culture. It's not a perfect situation, but people used to say to me 20, 30, 40 years ago, well, how long are these cultures going to survive? And 40 years ago, I probably would have said, yeah, 10, 20 years. But then 40 years on, they're still there. They are still very strong cultures. Not perfect, but, it's better than it might have been.
They're fighting to keep their land. Sorry.
We're getting there.
So, yes.
Yeah, is there a new generation of shamans and training, or is that getting lost?
A lot of it's getting lost. I won't lie to you, as they say. But there are people in training. There certainly are. And another project that we're involved in is in medicinal plants and nursery, because during COVID, they realized that some of the plants that they were using would save lives, basically, because some of the I don't know, the ingredients would help them to breathe. And so I was talking to one guy and he said, well, my uncle's a shaman. He knows all about this plant, but we can't get it anymore because where we used to get it is exactly where they've burnt the area. You despair. So I went with him and he said, look, maybe I said, can you maybe find a seedling somewhere? He said, maybe I can find a seedling. I said, well, find a seedling and let me know. So of course, we went back to London and I found a seedling. So I said, right, how about if we brought these seedlings, not just that plant, but others, to the village where you can control it. you know, and he said, well, we'd have to cover it because there's no natural cover. So we'd have to, you know, this, that. So it turned into a project basically, and it's going. It's slowly, but it's going. They've got, I think, 5 or 6 medicinal plants already. And the idea is that the shamans will then take, when it's propagated, you know, give it 4 years, I would say, they'll be able to take this up and down the river to other villages so that they can use the same plants. So it's not lost. Does that answer?
Yes, yes, great. I mean, I have connections in Ecuador and fabulous project Banco de Semillas.
Yeah.
Which likewise having during COVID, same thing, they discovered that they actually had useful plants. So actually a program of collecting and growing these things intentionally instead of just looking for them in the forest. It's a very new thing.
In the Xingu, they have a Sementes do Xingu, which is an absolutely fantastic thing, where women go out in various villages and they collect seeds, and they come back and the piles of beautiful seeds, all different colors, and it's just marvelous. And then one day they go and they pick them all up and throw them up in the air, and it's called a muvuca, which is like a big mess sort of thing. And then they take those seeds and they distribute them so that they can grow, and may the strongest one win. So they go through degraded. As I was saying before,
really
yeah, I know. So so they'll go in the forest, and this is one project where they went to get kumaru seeds, tonka beans, this is a friend of ours. She has a monkey, so I just thought I put that in just because I thought it was sweet. Anyway, these ladies are from the Babasu project. There's a Babasu, and yes, the forest is beautiful even at night. And, you know, that spirituality that I was talking about is so important. They see things in the forest. I remember once going and I saw this shadow, and I said to him, it looks like your dad. And he said, so you can see too. And I felt terribly proud that he recognized that I could feel that sort of sensitivity. This is
aphrodisiac.
Thank you. I can never pronounce it. It is. They say that the plants tell you what they're for. You know, you've got ones that look like a snake, which is great against poison, but on the specific snakes. So smiles are everywhere. I mean, in the rocks, you know, on our boat. But of course, the river is bloody dangerous. I mean, there are 400 kilometers of rapids. And if you don't know your way around, we always had local boatmen, but now the problem, you know, every sort of 400 or 500 kilometers, we change boatmen because nobody knew the full length of the river. So, you know, because of the lack of rain, the dryness of the river is so bad that lots of places you cannot get through, except if you're a ray fish, of course, a stingray. That's the Lake of the Needlefish, which is their name for stingrays. You don't want to go in there without asking permission first from the spirits of the forest. It was very hot. I did, and I'm here to tell the tale, so that's fine. But I think it's all a matter of attitude, of how you go in. If you can go into an area and just take off your mental clothes, your preconceptions of everything, and go in it like a baby, and just, not at a moment like this. So we had to sleep in hammocks, shame, with our hosts. Usually this was during a party, so there were lots of people, but there were many stretches of the river where we were too far between villages, so we had to pitch our tent. And of course you've got to be really quick, because you've only got a finite time to pitch your tent, get in there before the mosquitoes get you. Also, if you go out for a pee, don't go grabbing tree trunks in the dark, because they might be covered in spines, right, Erica? So, but in the morning, you'll see loads of, you know, footprints from animals that have come to see, what is this blue thing in the middle of my beach? You know, if it's a tapir, or if it's a snake that's slithered, or if it's an alligator, hello, jacaré, zone. And of course, it's so noisy. You know, we all think, oh, the forest is so wonderful. It is so noisy at night, whether you're, you know, crickets and birds and monkeys. And in the morning, you've got the howler monkeys that wake you up. And of course, the odd jaguar that just peeps through. The indigenous people do salvage a lot of animals and turn them into pets. That little girl's taking a thorn out of the spider monkey's hand. And there are butterflies everywhere, you know. So there's always the instigator of the calendar. He will then decide which days we've got festas, which day we've got harvest, which day is for planting. And he tells all the village, but often the village tells the neighboring village, and then suddenly there's a big party. Celebration. Thank you, Wade. I won't say it again. And so you can see how heavy each of those tortoises are. You can see, look how strong he is. Look at these muscles. You know, each one of those things weighs about 8 kilos. I mean, whew. Anyway, they do like colors, whether it's in their beads or in their lovely shorts. The girls have discovered lycra, which is always colorful. So the one thing I'm asked all the time, have you brought me flip-flops? Have you brought me lycra knickers? And I'm going, really? Well, who am I to say no, you know? Enough people go there to photograph and they decide, I'm going to wear shorts. Why not? Knickers, whatever. But the tradition continues. And often you'll go to a village and after a few days, the clothes kind of start to disappear and they're left au naturel. But these ladies make their own, they grow their own cotton and they make their own kangas, really, because they use them as skirts, protection against the sun, carrying babies, whatever. But the reason I put that picture in is because they respect the elders. They think every wrinkle tells a story. So when I go there, I'm very happy. So I think, oh, they respect me because I'm old. Anyway, this young man remembers when he was first contacted near Altamira. He's an Arara. And it was pretty horrendous. There was slaughter and it was absolute devastation. They're not in a good situation now. There's a lot of deforestation in their area. Cattle ranchers have moved in and well, it's a long story. But I always think there's hope in young people. And in her eyes, I think she holds the whole tradition of the tribe. Somehow that look is just a freedom of life, like the river. Sorry, you stopped. So the river is beautiful, but even that had incredible negative clouds over it. This is the area where the Belo Monte Dam was built, unfortunately. I mean, there are areas of archaeological interest. You know, we fought tooth and nail with indigenous peoples when it first started. They're so against any kind of infrastructure because they know the meaning of it. You know, even a road, they just say, please just stop. So they get together, they want to send a message out to us. Please stop them, please stop them. I mean, the Belo Monte Dam, even Sting tried to give his support at the time, you know, and it worked for a few years, and this, you know, the Kayapo women, I love them because they are strong and they don't give a damn. They'll just go and fight. And the men will follow. No matter what tribe, no matter what shape or size, they will fight. And they will fight to secure their land. Marco temporal, no. So, and the other thing, of course, is Raoni. He's the big spokesperson. He's a chief of the Metuktire, and he was there in all sorts of places. Rio +20, you know, the violence breaks out all over the place. There are clashes between police. The indigenous people went to Brasilia. There's Raoni talking to a senator in, you know, in his office. He'll go to the ATL, which is the Acampamento Terra Livre, which is the free land camp, which happens every year. And more indigenous peoples are present And more women are present at these events, which is fantastic. Raoni went to Paris, he received the Equator Prize. You know, he's everywhere. He came to Parliament, he spoke to parliamentarians here to say, please do something about the companies that are involved with destroying the Amazon forest. He speaks on television in Brazil. He spoke at Channel 4 here. You know, he's done lots of things. And last year he had the most amazing chamado. He called indigenous peoples to come to his village and to join forces. And it was very timely because you've got Joenia here, who's the head of FUNAI, you know, Célia Chacriapá, she's a deputada. You got Sonia Guarajara, who's the Minister for Indigenous Affairs. You got Juma Shipaya. Davi Yanomami, he's not a woman, but boy, he's fantastic. He's such a shaman. And Raoni holding everybody's hand together, saying, yes, there were thousands of indigenous people and only a handful of brancos, white people like us. But I was so honored to be there. I really was. So that's why I put the picture into. Was in my sports. Anyway, so they had something called the Indigenous Games a few years ago, where indigenous peoples from all over the world came together. So they were able to discuss things. And last year, Raoni was in New York with Marina Silva and all sorts of other indigenous peoples. And because they had Amazônia vem para os Estados Unidos, so there was a big display of pictures in Times Square, and there was a big show with Callions Brown and all sorts of other people in Central Park, and Raoni was there to voice again, please help us to stop this destruction. It's not just for you. It's not just for me, but it's for the whole world. So they came to London when we launched our book. They're all happy there. They've all got their picture in the book, of course. And we're stuck again. So really what I'm trying to say here is, you know, you're all blessed. You've got knowledge. You're here because you've reached here. Now I'm telling you to reach forward with all your strength and might and your knowledge and make a difference in this world. Make this a better world. Thank you. What? Oh, sorry. Well, I can't help that. Technical hitch.
Thank you. Fantastic. Sorry for the glitch.
Questions?
We'll take over 10 minutes of questions. Anybody want to
Can you?
have a question? No, I'll go.
Thank you. That was amazing. Beautiful as well to watch. I wondered whether there has been any improvement in the last year or two since the new administration, and whether there's any tangible improvement or whether the pressures remain exactly the same. And you know, how can you tell?
Okay, he's going to answer.
The answer is
Yes or no?
there have been some remarkable improvements. Deforestation has come down. I think it's about 50% on what it was during the last Bolsonaro year. There's been some improvement in sort of healthcare. There's been some effort to remove gold miners, illegal gold miners from the territories. Frankly, it hasn't succeeded as much as a lot of people would hope. The Yanomami is still suffering a huge amount of issues from gold miners. The Kayapo still have Garimpero gold miners in their territory, although they're getting more support to remove them. So because they can't rely on the government to do what the government should do and send in forces to remove them, they're having to do it themselves. They're having to monitor their borders. They're having to police their borders. As Sue said, they're setting up small villages and posts along the borders of the indigenous areas. And they're policing them. So they're actually catching people and taking them out. There have been improvements, marked improvements, but there's still a long way to go.
And indigenous peoples who are voicing, you know, they're in Brasilia, they're in positions where they are heard. Admittedly, sometimes in Congress, there's a battle that ensues because you've got the Bolsonaristas in Congress, and they will then shout down anybody who's talking because they're probably indigenous. So, but, you know, there's a conversation going on now, which there was never before. The door was shut for them. And now there are tiny little ways that they get through.
Anyone else?
You mentioned quite light-heartedly when talking about the gentleman with the mercury and his wedding ring kind of melting, that, yeah, there were some situations, and that's another story. But I think it seems that there were some scary situations, and it's not necessarily the indigenous people who sometimes on the Western world we think like, ooh, they're coming for you.
Well, of course.
Have you had
Well, of
actually
course.
really,
I mean,
really crazy situations?
I didn't want to go into that because this is really about
Sorry.
them and not us. But, you know, I mean, of course, there were situations, never mind, you know, the difficulties of navigating on a river that's low with rocks in just below the surface. You can't see them because the sun shines off it. You need someone. But anyway, and you know, and creatures and broken ribs by falling down dry waterfalls, but also when we went to San Felix do Xingu, we had to stop off mainly because we were uploading pictures to BBC Brazil because they were running a whole thing, so people in Brazil could actually watch our progress. And we, in those days, it took 40 minutes per picture. So yes, a bit time. So while we were there, we had to eat, and there was only one place, and it was a sort of, you know, little place where you could just get a plate of food. And it was San Felix do Xingu, where loggers actually cross the river there, and then they go and are exported through Belém to Europe. So, and there's a so-called road. I took all those pictures out. Anyway, one night when we were eating on our little wobbly table, a truck pulled up with 15 guys. And one guy came out and started shouting at us and sort of saying, ah, bloody Americans, bleh, because I can get away with speaking Portuguese and best slang, swear like a trooper, but I can't hide him. You know, it doesn't work. And so it was a bit hairy because there were 15 of them. They were drunk, you know, it was payday. And then another time, one guy came, we were also sitting having something to eat because they were a sitting duck. And this guy came up and he just unbuttoned his shirt, and I thought, you know, what are you doing? And he kind of went like this. He said, so when are you leaving? Because we want you to leave now. And in his waistband was the holster of a gun. So, you know, it wasn't like, but it was near enough to make us get in that boat the next morning and just disappear before dawn, before he was up, because he was drunk too. I could go on, but I'm not going to. Yes, Nikki.
It's for the online ones.
Would I go back? Yes.
Thank you so much. That's amazing as always. And I wondered about the commitments of finance to move directly into indigenous leadership, commitments made at COP26. And I mean, how do you see are you seeing lessons from disbursement of finance to indigenous peoples? And, you know, how could we do better with that? What's needed? Because you reflected on finance, you know, at a micro level coming in and the corrosive effect. But, you know, with the move to get more effective disbursement of finance, where do you see it?
Them is the answer.
And so where do you see, how do you see the big commitments of finance being able to be managed well?
Yeah.
So
Big question.
So before Bolsonaro, there was the
Can you speak
Amazon
up? Because
Fund.
you're not-
And the Amazon Fund was actually remarkably successful. It was a lot of it was from Norway and also Germany. It was managed by the Brazilian Development Bank, but it was actually well managed, and it did distribute funds to indigenous organizations who made good use of it for the things we talked about, policing the borders and stuff like that. Also developing income streams. When Bolsonaro came in, that dried up. That is now back in place, and I'm glad, pleased, happy to say that the UK is actually contributing to it as well. So actually before the Amazon Fund, I would have said international financial assistance, government to government, never works. It's very wasteful, it doesn't go at the right pace. But the Amazon Fund did work. It wasn't actually directly to government because it went into the development bank rather than into government coffers. It's very important for them to develop their own income streams, but in a way which doesn't make them wage
Dependent.
slaves.
Mm.
So that's one of the things that we do a lot of, as you've seen with the various projects, the oil and the honey and the textiles and so on. Large amounts of money are really difficult to manage effectively and sensitively. Large amounts of money from corporations and companies tend to be put in the hands of individuals, and they're very, very divisive. So it is an issue. The money's there. How it is transferred and how it is used needs work.
But there are associations, you know, a lot of the indigenous peoples have become real strong associations and institutions in their own right, often employing a white person to be the accountant or the administrator, which is brilliant because if they don't like what he's doing, they'll kick him out. And then they're savvy, they're not stupid, they understand. They might not be very good at making each one individual sum, but when they look at the bigger picture, they know damn well what's going on. So those associations and those institutions are the ones to distribute amongst their villages, because some of them are in charge of 20 or 30 villages. You know, that's a lot of people. And, you know, a little bit of money goes a long way.
And having that capacity to handle the money coming in is really, really important. And that has developed a lot over the last
Not everywhere, though.
10 to 20
There's
years.
still a problem.
Hi. Yeah, thanks. You talked, or there's been a lot of talk about technology or cultural influence going one way. And I wondered if you came back taking anything the other way. Did you reject anything when you came back that you didn't want to use anymore? Yeah, because you're talking about them.
I'll give you one example.
Okay.
When we got to St. Felix de Xingu, I thought, oh, there's a little shop. Oh, this is amazing. They've got Anadin and they've got shampoo. Oh, they've got another bottle of shampoo. Oh, they've got another bottle of shampoo. And I stood there and Dad said to me, goodness sake, just get a bottle of shampoo. You're dying to wash your hair properly. Go on, just get. I said, I don't know which one to choose. For instance, you know, we've got so many products and it's all the same. I mean, if you look at the ingredients, they're all the same. I mean, okay, so you're sold on the advertising or so-and-so selling this, you know, influencers and all that. But at the bottom line, we have such a huge choice. It seems to me such a waste. So yes, there are things that we rejected. And I mean, over the years, I've learned to change ways, you know. I still have my nails done now and again.
I think on a personal level, we haven't been radical, but we have moved steadily in what we consider to be a more sustainable manner. So we actually we don't go to the big, COP meetings. I don't actually think that they achieve very much, and they produce a lot of hot air and carbon dioxide. Unfortunately, our son is a pilot, so we do still fly.
Yeah, but the
But
other one
we-
is a musician, so.
But we do take steps, we do all the recycling, we do, we're already
Yeah, but that's for 40 years. I mean,
non-meat
when Raoni, who's extremely particular about where he is and what he does and where he sleeps and what he eats, if he knows he's coming to London, I get this frantic phone call from the institute saying, Raoni's arriving at such a, he'll be on that flight. And I said, it's all right, his room's ready. He makes a point of staying with us because he knows he's going to get taken care of. He's going to be fed the right food. I'm not going to let hordes of people come in and say, oh, give me an autograph. Oh, can I take a picture? All this business. And I'm terribly protective of him.
And he feels comfortable in our garden.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Definitely. He goes out for his little smoke. And I say, you're right, Raoni. Yeah, and that's it. Peace. But yeah, I mean, we've for 40 years, I've been listening to them and trying to be, I don't know, better about things. I still get terribly angry and I shout at people and I lose my temper, which the Kayapo don't do.
Yeah, but I think it's much better for 100 people to move 10% in the right direction than for one person to move 100%. So, from my point of view, I will keep moving in the right direction. I won't, you have to live. So I won't go to the extremes. But if everybody moves in the right direction, then, the world's heading in the right direction.
And there's room for questions later.
Yeah. No, thank you. It's absolutely fantastic and inspiring and funny and everything as always. So thank you very much for your so there are books, some other goods from the Xingu there as well. So feel free to have a look. Drinks at the back, so feel free to linger and have a more informal conversation as well. Thank you.
There's a £5 discount on the books, by the way. Anyway. Thank you.